strategy in April 2024. So Alison is going to give us an update on how we're getting on with implementing the measures in the strategy, and we'll also set out some of the ongoing challenges and how we can work together to address them. I'll just also quickly introduce Lorna. Lorna will be following on doing the second talk this evening. Lorna Selby is a Policy and Advocacy Officer at the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust. And Lorna will be talking about the Trust Save Our Chalk Streams campaign, the work with MPs on amending the Planning and Infrastructure Bill, and the work currently taking place with local councillors across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. And Lorna will be letting people know how they can get involved if they wish to. So I will now pass over to Alison Matthews. Thank you, Alison.
Hi, good evening. It's lovely to see lots of people, and there's quite a few names there that I recognise, so I know that I have a pretty well-informed audience, as I would expect from this group. So just to start off with, I'm going to run through a little bit about the Rivers Trust, which is the organisation that I work for, a bit about chalk streams, much of which you will know, but I hope to throw in a few things that may be new, and then tell you a little bit about the delivery of the chalk stream strategy and what we're working on, and also try and make that relevant to the test and itch and to show you a little bit about how that might relate to some of the work that you do. So just to start with the Rivers Trust, it's a new job for me. As Chris explained, I'd spent a long time working in Hampshire and Isle of Wight, and I started with the Rivers Trust last April, kind of attracted by their kind of mantra, which is sort of using data and evidence and working with people to make a difference for our rivers. So the work or the job that I have is specifically to work on chalk streams, but I work with many people who work across the Rivers Trust movement. So the Rivers Trust itself has 65 member trusts, which are shown on the map, and you're probably familiar with Wessex Rivers Trust, who are the ones who do work in this area. So they do a lot of work on river restoration, they do a lot of educational work, and that mirrors what many of those other member trusts do. So I went from a position of having sort of Hampshire and Isle of Wight as my kingdom to now being able to sort of look across Ireland, Scotland, Wales and England. But of course, there aren't any chalk streams outside of England, so I'm still fairly firmly based in England. So as I say, many of you know a lot of this, so I apologise, but there could be people on the call who don't know about chalk streams, perhaps. So I'll include some information about that and try and explain a few extra things too. So you'll know that a chalk stream obviously receives groundwater that's coming out of the chalk aquifer. And the flow regime of chalk streams is really stable. They're what I describe as really sort of polite, well-behaved rivers. They can have very low flows and very high flows, but in general, the flow regime's pretty moderate. And they don't cause too many problems in the landscape, unlike some of the bigger, flashier rivers that we have in other places. They get referred to as being low energy rivers. And what that means and what the impact of that is if you put sediment in a low energy river, it struggles to be able to move it. And these streams naturally don't have much sediment in them because they have water flowing from the chalk. So there's not much surface water flow going into them. So they should be naturally low sediment. And so if you put sediment in, it can't be moved. And if you change the course of a chalk stream, it will struggle to move because it doesn't have the energy to break itself out of whatever course you put it in. So what's done to a chalk stream kind of stays done to it, which can create problems. There's also great importance with these rivers of the in-stream vegetation and the riparian vegetation in providing habitat and shaping these rivers and their floodplains too. So overall, chalk streams with their unique characteristics make fantastic habitats and they're very biodiverse. So where are they found? Again, you may be aware of this, but the chalk extends all the way up through to Yorkshire, through from sort of Dorset and goes off into Kent. So you find chalk streams all the way through that area. But I have to say, having visited lots of chalk streams in different patches now, they all do come in quite different shapes and sizes. So the test and the itching are really quite different from some of the scarp springs that come off the back of the South Downs. They're also very different from the ones that run across the Lincolnshire coast. Although I was really struck by the Driffield Beck, which is in Yorkshire, which, to be honest, if you closed your eyes and you didn't know you'd travelled up north, you could stand by it and think you were on a tributary of the Test and the Itchin. It looks very similar. So there's quite a lot of variety in the chalk streams, despite having those common themes. But what they do all need is good flow, good quality water, and natural habitat. That's what they need to thrive. So Apologies, there's a few graphs in here. For those who do know me, I like a graph and I like a map as well. So there's a few graphs and maps in here. So this is really trying to give an indication of what the state of the whole of our chalk streams is. So I'm looking at the whole country's chalk streams, not just the Test and the Itchen. And I have put a note for those who've dabbled in Water Framework Directive, you'll probably be aware that it's a really confused, or can be a very confusing and complicated data set, and it's not always directly comparable. So I've on the right there, I've shown what the ecological status is in 2015 and how it's changed to 2022. But sometimes there are changes in the way things are classified. So it may not be directly comparable, but it gives you a good impression. And what it shows you is that really there hasn't been much movement in the status of ecological status of chalk streams in those 7 years. So we still have good news. We still have 52 of these water bodies at chalk streams that are good. Some of them have gone down to moderate. Some of them have gone from moderate up to good. So there's been a bit of movement either way. Some strange ones have even gone from poor up to good or bad up to good. So there are some sort of strange outliers. But I think the take home from this is sort of 63%. So a big chunk of chalk streams are what's called moderate status. They're not achieving what they should. And there's a stubborn sort of category down here in the sort of the bad and the poor that still there's quite a few in this category which really need to be boosted. Now you may remember that by 2027, I think is it 75% have all got to get to good, and it's looking fairly unlikely that that's going to happen. Now on the Test and the Itchen, you are in a more fortunate position if you're happy with the classification status that WFD gives these rivers, in that 47% are good and 53% are moderate. But I know from talking to people on the ground, there isn't always a belief that the WFD categories accurately reflect what the real condition of the chalk streams are, particularly the invertebrate classification, where I think a lot of people feel the invertebrates should be in better health than they are, even though they're often classed as high or good. So what's affecting the chalk streams? What's meaning that they're not achieving what they should be? And this is it's probably not hugely surprising to most of you who know the rivers well. So the number one big thing are barriers. This is stopping fish moving. It's creating impounded reaches. It's slowing flows. It's breaking up the lateral continuity of the rivers. So they're the number one sort of thing that are causing problems in chalk streams. Next up are the sewage discharges. Again, that will come as no surprise. And nutrients, which can mean nitrates and phosphates from sewage, but also from land use as well. Groundwater abstraction off of a public water supply is also up there as a big issue, along with those other sort of factors. So soil management, you see a photo there of runoff from fields getting onto roads and into rivers. That silt getting into chalk streams I mentioned earlier is a really big problem. And then there's a whole raft of kind of emerging, growing challenges. The picture at the top left there is a reminder for me. I was trying to think of something to represent climate change. Chalk streams are really vulnerable to climate change from the point of view of their rising temperatures could mean that the lovely, cool, clear water that chalk streams have is going to get warmer if we don't take any action. And that it's still not quite clear what the impact of changing rainfall patterns will be on groundwater levels and on river flow. But I think most of the evidence points towards river flows getting lower at this point. So big potential changes coming from climate change. The picture of chalk there, the chalk is our friend. So it's not a bad thing. It's not an emerging challenge. It's been there for over 65 million years. But what is the emerging challenge with the chalk aquifer is the contaminants that are already in it and still making their way through it to get down into our rivers. So the agency I know have done some great modelling work looking at how long it takes pollution at the surface to get through the chalk aquifer and into the rivers. Now, in some cases, that's a really short pathway. It might only take, could even take months or a few years. But rain that's falling onto the ground in our headwaters, right up on the high bits of land, can take over 100 years to work its way through and get down into our rivers. So what we're seeing in some places is contaminants that were banned decades ago are still finding their way into our rivers because they're coming through as a kind of legacy system through the groundwater. So that's a growing concern. There's also a quote here from Clive Lewis, who's actually a Labour MP up in Norwich. He, in response to the Climate and Nature Bill, came up with this phrase, "You can't have growth on a dead planet." It's a pretty compelling speech, actually. And he was referring to the government's sort of growth agenda and concerns that if you don't take nature into account alongside growth, then you're not going to actually have any growth because you're not going to have what you need to sustain a vital economy. So I think there's growing concern about growth and development and impacts on not just chalk streams, but far wider than that. And alongside that, there's also growing population, growing demand for water, growing demand for wastewater discharge as well, which is a big concern for our chalk streams. And then one at the bottom there at the middle is a reminder that chalk streams have this wonderful crystal clear water, but there's this growing concern about what actually you find in that crystal clear water, which shouldn't be there. I don't know whether any of you saw this week, there was some in the news about sewage sludge, which is one of these sort of hidden threats. And it gets put up on our catchments, and there's a growing concern about the microplastics that you find in it and the forever chemicals you find in it. And there's also that concern that if that finds its way into the groundwater, it takes decades to work its way through. So you can't easily fix these things once they've happened. On top of that, there's all the concerns about pet parasiticides, it's hard to say, household chemicals. And I know watercress and winterbournes have been doing some great work trying to shine a light on that and influencing people on their use of chemicals. And then just finally, I couldn't not mention the poor beleaguered salmon on the Test in the Itchen. That is a real concern that we may even see the extinction of chalk stream salmon through a combination of factors if we're not careful. So into the midst of all of this comes a chalk stream restoration strategy. You may have wondered when I was going to get to that. So in 2021, Charles Rangeley Wilson, along with a huge range of people across lots of different sectors, produced this chalk stream restoration strategy. And in 2022, an implementation plan was produced which contains 34 actions, and they're bracketed into that sort of trinity of ecological health, so water resources, water quality and physical habitat, and we have 34 actions which I am kind of loosely in charge. I'm not sure in charge. I'm tasked with trying to make sure that those things all happen, and overarching those is something called the One Big Wish, and I'll come back to that in a minute. So I just want to take you through, having outlined the state of chalk streams, the challenges they're under, the fact that we have a strategy. What other things are we doing in your particular area and across the other chalk streams right now? So back to the One Big Wish. And this is something Lorna's been very involved in too. This is where we very much have a crossover. So the One Big Wish is that chalk streams, all chalk streams, should be recognised and protected in policies and initiatives to make sure that they're protected and they're restored. So 11 out of the more than 200 chalk streams have got designation. You're very fortunate. You're sitting in that very rare privileged position of having some of the most designated chalk streams that there are. So the River Itchen is designated an SAC, Special Area of Conservation. The River Test is a triple SI, and its tributaries, and the River Itchen is also triple SI. Not all bits of it, but majority of both rivers have got some degree of designation. The tributaries on the Test less so. So they receive better treatment than many of our non-designated chalk streams, which really suffer from lack of investment. So trying to raise the profile. So there was something called the Chalk Stream Recovery Pack, which the previous government were going to sign up to, which contained a series of measures for improving chalk streams. We almost got it there, and then Rishi Sunak called the election, and from that point onwards, the chalk stream recovery pack kind of disappeared, fell off the sort of the side of the table, and we've tried to encourage the government to bring it back, because we think it contains really useful commitments the government could make, but they have stubbornly and steadfastly kind of sort of stood up to our engagement and haven't promised to release it. So somebody, not me, somebody actually put together a petition, a chalkstream petition, and you may have been asked to sign it. I hope some of you did. And when I printed this off, there was something like 11,200 signatures. There's, I think, now over 11,600, and that's enough for the government to have to make a response to us. They haven't. Well, they'll make the response to the person who raised the petition, who I must get in touch with, actually, to see if she's heard from them or not. And we're hoping that the government will start to listen to that wider support. There's also, and I think Lorna's going to say more about it, the Wildlife Trust Save Our Chalk Streams campaign. So you'll hear a bit more about that in a minute. And we've also been working with our friends and colleagues across lots of other groups, so River Action, Wildfish, the Wildlife Trust, the Angling Trust, to really raise our voices in again, not against the entirety, but bits of the planning and infrastructure bill in particular needing to have some recognition of chalk streams in that. So the picture on the right there was only last week, I think it was. Lorna and I were up at the House of Commons, having a meeting with MPs, trying to explain to them the importance of protecting chalk streams and asking for their support in amendments to the Planning and Infrastructure Bill. And it was in fact debated again this week. And Lorna was telling me earlier that I think there was about 10 MPs who stood up and spoke passionately about the need to protect chalk streams. So we're really pleased that our voice is cutting through. We just like to see it making a difference. And that's what's not happened yet, but we're working on that. So that's a really big part of what I do. Next bit is to do with data. There's lots of data and really wanting to improve the chalk stream map. I guess you could say that you're lucky in this patch because I know it quite well. Hampshire's the first bit that I've been working on improving the chalk stream map. Natural England have a priority habitat map. The chalk stream map I'm working on, we're looking to add extra data, for example, recording the winterbourne reaches, the reaches which flow only occasionally, and perhaps recording other data in there. And if we ever get sort of any form of designation for chalk streams, this map may become more important. So I'm working on that, and I'm really keen to work with groups like Watercress and Winterbournes to make sure this map is as accurate as it can be, and with other groups across the country as well. Also keeping tabs on what's going on in the water company world. So that crops up in the news on a regular basis, particularly in the context of wastewater discharges. And this map here, sorry, it's a little bit busy, it's a bit colourful, lots of dots. So the background colouring is the WFD phosphate status. So blue is high status and green is good status. So on the basis of that, Tessenich are not looking too bad. And then the dots on the map are the wastewater treatment works, the water company wastewater treatment works. And the colour of those dots relates to what the phosphorus limit is going to be at the end of AMP8, which is 2030. And I guess the good news in that is the pale blue means that it's a really high standard. So you see a lot of pale blue dots, and the size of the dots related to the size of the works. So big pale blue dots is good. That means your big works are covered with quite high standards for P. Red dots mean that at the end of 2030, there's still not proposed to be any P limits. So that I think is probably going to be a concern for some, particularly as those tend to appear in the headwaters, which is your focus area. And it's an area for us as well to be concentrating on to make sure headwaters are protected. So really keeping an eye on what the water companies say they're going to do and checking that that is what they do. In another part of the country, Thames Water failed to deliver, I can't remember the precise number, but it was about 10% of their Water Industry National Environment Programme. I don't quite know what's happened in relation to that, what penalties they get. Obviously, they have their own issues to deal with. But Southern Water, as far as I can understand, have delivered what they promised to deliver by 2025, which is good. And we're seeing that progressive tightening of permits. Another issue that we're really focusing on is trying to shine more of a light on sediment runoff. Particularly runoff from fields where it interacts with highways and then shoots straight down into our chalk streams. And this is a really nice little bit of work that I know Watercress and Winterbourne's been very involved in with the Cheriton, Cheriton stream in Cheriton, working with the local group up there, trying to talk with Hampshire Highways and prevent that runoff from getting into the rivers. So this is actually, the map is my work, but what's actually going on behind that is the local work of the team there. And I want to roll this map out more widely to help other people deliver some of the sorts of great work Watercress and Winterbourne's have been doing. And that little sort of Venn diagram is my reminder that you need all three of those things to actually make things happen. You need data, you need the people to make it happen, but importantly for anything like this, you need the funding. And so finding ways to get local highways authorities engaged and actively involved in this is quite a challenge. And it's a project I'd like to do more on across all of the chalk streams. But it's great to see, I guess, Watercress and Winterbourne's blazing a bit of a trail here for showing perhaps how things can happen and how you can make a difference. Water resources, there's always work going on in the world of water resources, and it's always very long term. So I think one of my challenges with water resources work is making it more accessible to people to understand what's going on. So I'm on a bit of a mission with the regional water resources groups at the moment to try and work with them to make information more accessible to catchment groups, to groups like yours, to really be able to see what's happening and when it's happening, partly so that we can be more active in holding people to account for when things don't happen when they should. And also just so that I think we need time-bound steps towards things. A lot of the water resources work is only going to be delivered in the 2040s potentially. And I think we need to better track it far more closely so we can see whether we're going to hit those targets in the 2040s or not. And there's a lot in here as well about the need to make more efficient use of water resources, particularly with new houses going into places where chalk streams are providing the water supply. We really need to see more active engagement from government to push harder for better water efficient houses, and from people to reduce what they use in terms of water use in the home too. And in fact, a stat that I often trot out, which I find quite fascinating, is if you look at the amount of extra water that's needed up to 2050 to account for climate change and growth and more people, over 60% of that is coming from reducing leakage and from demand management. Only a third is coming from brand new schemes like Havant Thicket or reservoirs. So about 2/3 is coming from making better use of what's already taken out of the ground. That's a huge amount. It's going to take a big change to make that a reality. So again, working with local groups to push for water efficiency is really important. Moving towards the latter stages, there's a lot going on. I apologise for bombarding you with so many things, but I'm really keen that I show you the variety of work that we're involved in, because some of it may be of more interest or interest to you than others. River restoration, I love this bit of work actually because it's something I don't know an awful lot about, so I'm learning a lot from being involved. So we have been working with groups like, you've heard, certainly this group's had Mike Blackmore speak before. I think he's coming back again actually. He's doing you another talk. Mike's fabulous. He's really engaging, so do listen to him. But people like Mike and other people who've got that sort of level of expertise, we're teaming up with them to try and give people better support to guide river restoration work. I think you're very lucky here that you have some great people delivering river restoration in your catchment. There isn't the other catchments don't have that benefit, and they have less experienced people guiding the work, and so they're really keen to be, I guess, learn a bit from some of the work that's going on in other places. We also work very closely with Southampton University and David Sear, who's a well-renowned geomorphologist. So we have access to some really great people who can help us really up the game for river restoration. So we're really wanting it to be more ambitious, go bigger, and there's some great examples of that in this patch that we'd like to share more widely with others. And we're working on how we can do that. And it's through a kind of cross section of things, from online offerings to webinars to site visits. We need to use a range of techniques to talk to people and engage with them, not just. So when I say a river restoration guide, this is not a great big fat book that won't get used. We need to come up with new ways to engage and to encourage people. And also, messy chalk streams are not for everyone. This is going to be an uphill struggle to have messy chalk streams in some parts of the Test and the Itchen. So there's a lot of understanding about what landowners are up for, what they're not up for. And of course, landowners are key to river restoration. You know, we really need to get on board with them and understand what their constraints and limitations and what opportunities there are. So there's lots of great opportunity, a lot to be done there. And then just moving towards the end, something again I know you're very involved in is monitoring. And I thought I'd pick up a little bit about citizen science. And I was thinking, citizen science, you know what? It's not new. Everybody talks about it as if it's a new thing. My previous job, we used to work with rainfall observers, and they had been providing volunteer-based rainfall observations to the Met Office for decades. So there's a lot of citizen science that's been around for quite a long time. But this particular thing, riverfly monitoring, has really taken off. So the green bars I've got on there, this is for across all chalk streams, are the agency riverfly or invert. It's not the same thing, to be fair. Their invertebrate monitoring will be done at great detail. The riverfly monitoring is not done to the same level of detail. But you can see there really clearly a decline. It's not a steady decline. There's a decline. I think 2013 was a WFD classification year, which is why you've got that spike there. And then it comes down again. And it's now the number of samples, the number of sites that the agency visit is now at an all-time low. And of course, taking up the slack are the riverfly monitors there, who you can see quite clearly from 2006, where it was a very niche activity. It's become really mainstream with a number of sites that people are visiting and getting data for. And to be fair to Smart Rivers, That's the only data I had. Smart Rivers has been running longer than 2024, but I just didn't have the data for the previous. So the Smart Rivers is also now providing a really valuable sort of insight into the state of our invertebrates across our chalk streams. And just to bring it back to sort of local level. So this is 1994. And the green dots are the Environment Agency invertebrate monitoring sites, and the red ones. So yeah, early adopters in riverfly monitoring by the look of it. And then 2024, you see a huge number of red dots. Hopefully some of you are very familiar. Hopefully I've got the right ones and you're not going to tell me I've got the wrong ones. These red dots are probably almost certainly going to be watercress and winterbourne's red dots, and the involvement from the agency has reduced a lot. So the citizen scientists are really helping to plug the gap in knowledge and data in those places, particularly if you added the Smart Rivers data on too. And there's other things that are going on. There's water quality monitoring. There's MudSpotter, which is, I don't know whether you do MudSpotter actually, but it's recording sediment runoff into streams, which some people do. And there's something called Crowdwater, which is an app where you can record if rivers are flowing or not. It's something the Environment Agency is looking, along with another app, which name I forget, to try and roll out a bit wider, because it's really easy citizen science data to collect. People walking their dogs or out on a walk or living near a river can just record whether it's flowing or not, and we can really accurately map then how those winterbournes rise and flow up and down their reaches. And I guess just to finish with, really, protecting chalk streams is a team effort. I think that's really brought home to me in the just over a year that I've been doing this job. I kind of see myself sitting in the middle of lots of things. And I feel very privileged to be sitting in the middle of lots of things, actually, because I get to see some fantastic work that happens by local groups. And I also get an opportunity to try and share that more widely. So this is just a little bit of a dip into some of the things that we've been sharing, and how it's been adopted by others. So I would say, I think if I had to count the groups who have the most prolific sharing of useful resources and tools, I'd say Watercress and Winterbourne's is right up there with the guys on the River Chess. So you can see a couple of River Chess Chilterns things over here. They've developed some planning guidance, which their local authorities have adopted, I believe, as supplementary planning guidance. And that's now out and available for others to be able to look at. And I think Watercress and Winterbourne's were looking at this in some recent workshops that Catherine had organised. They've also done some really great stuff on citizen science. They've done pretty much every citizen science thing that's going, and they've produced this book. It's available as a kind of like online flip book, which is really worth a look if you're at all interested in chalk stream citizen science. It's a really nice description of what data they've collected and how they've used that to make a difference in their river, which is really important. It's not just collecting it for data's sake, it's making a difference. We've got our webinars that we run, which we had another one just this week on local nature recovery strategies. They seem well received. We enjoy running them. There's your Chalk Stream Challenge badge, which has been picked up and is now having a new life for itself in the Chilterns. It's fabulous to see those sorts of outreach opportunities being taken up and used elsewhere. And the Winterbourne guidance, which I know is close to being finished, I think others will be really interested to see that and to pick up on it too. And that picture down the bottom there is just a picture of us, Lorna's on there somewhere, Lorna's in the middle there, at the House of Commons last week. And that's just a sort of an illustration of the fact that we're working across lots of different organisations, all coming together to try and work and protect chalk streams. And I guess I kind of sit in the middle of it. So just to finish, there's a lot going on. I am a fool to myself in that I like to say yes to far too many things and then I regret it afterwards. It's because it's an interesting job and it's a worthwhile one. So these are things that I'm supposed to be focusing on over the next year. So, the overarching one is this one big wish, really trying to make sure that people sit up and take notice of chalk streams and we make sure that we protect them. That's a really big, important thing to do. I'm also really keen, and some of the data I've shown you is data I've been putting together to present an annual report for 2024, which is kind of to reflect on some of the things I've talked to you about. So how has it gone with delivery of the Water Industry National Environment Programme? As a lot of schemes were due for delivery by 2025. Did they get delivered? What benefits has that brought? What's the state of play with citizen science? What's the state in WFD status? So the annual report should be a kind of state of our chalk streams update, fairly light touch because it's just me, so I haven't got time to write a massive book. And also to reflect on the delivery of those 34 actions within the implementation plan. So that I'm hoping for some quiet time over the summer to write that. So hopefully that's coming out in September, along with the data that sits behind it, so that people can start exploring that themselves. And hopefully it'll be useful for local groups. I want to finish the inventory and the map of the chalk streams, which is very much going to be a work in progress. So when it's out there, it's not going to be complete. I definitely want to get feedback and input from local groups so that we end up with a chalk stream map that we're all happy with. In the webinar about local nature recovery strategies, it was clear that it would be really handy to have an updated map that people can feed into, that we can use and refer to for that. So that's quite a big task that's going to take quite a while to finish. Identifying future water company investment needs is in particular looking at the next AMP round, which starts in 2030. Where are the places we still need to see investment? So where are we still seeing problems? Where are our big, are things tracking along as they should be for storm overflow reductions for chalk streams? Are we seeing reductions of discharges in our headwaters, tightening of conditions on those? So working with other groups, and I should have said actually that we have 3 expert panels that guide what we do. So we work with people from water companies, academia, other organisations across water quality, water resources and physical habitat to guide what we do. So we work with them to identify these future needs. Develop the chalk stream river restoration guide. That's our physical habitat group. That's their big task, which we're working on now, and work with the regional water resource groups and the companies and the agency to prioritise sustainable abstraction. I know that's a hot topic in this patch, but it's a hot topic in places which are not designated chalk streams, where nothing is due to happen for decades, and that's something we are really looking to try and come up with ideas about how we can start to make some progress in those areas where nothing is happening at the minute at all. And then finally, this idea of trying to link up agricultural sort of field runoff. And as somebody explained to me the other day, it's not just agriculture, it's car parks, it's all sorts of things. This link up with highways, and also the risk of chemicals coming from highways, trying to really shine more of a light on where those high risk spots are, and working with landowners, farmers, highways authorities to try and find practical solutions to that. So a lot of this is all about trying to be pragmatic, trying to actually make things happen, and trying not to wait until sort of perfection happens, but to make things happen and get gradual improvements as we go. But yes, there's a lot there to do. I love working with all the local groups, continue to get out and learn more from them, and really excited to see what Watercress and Winterbourne's is going to deliver in its final few months. So thank you.
Thank you, Alison. That was really interesting. We're now going to pass on to Lorna, Policy and Advocacy Officer at the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust. And Lorna will be talking about the Trust Save Our Chalk Stream campaign and the work she's doing with MPs and local councillors across Hampshire. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And yeah, thanks, Alison. That was really interesting to listen to and hear a bit more about what you get up to outside of campaigning. Can everyone see my screen okay? I can't see you nodding, by the way.
Yeah, it's all good, Lorna.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Just wanted to make sure before I go on. So yeah, I am the policy officer at the Trust, and I am the chair of the Save Our Chalk Streams campaign, which is a campaign running across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, Wiltshire, Norfolk, Oxfordshire, Berkshire, Buckinghamshire, many shires, and London Wildlife Trust areas. So we have quite a big reach among us, and yeah, we've been getting up to lots of interesting things around what Alison's been talking about. So I will sort of talk a little bit more about the campaign, the aims of our campaign and the ideas behind it, and then some of the actions we've been taking on the national level and on the local level. So to sort of start us off and to help you understand where the Save Our Chalk Streams campaign fits in at the Trust, we have 3 headline goals at the Trust. So these are nature and recovery, which would be towards the government's 30 by 30 targets under the Environment Act. 1 in 4 people taking action for nature, which is where we get people like you involved. And I also run a small group of campaigning volunteers, who we get involved, as well as key decision makers like MPs and local councillors, and nature as a solution, which of course is so important when you're talking about something like chalk streams, which are so valuable for reducing our flood risk and increasing our resilience to climate change. So this is sort of where the campaign is born out of, and we are particularly focusing on chalk streams as we are so lucky to have so many of them in our area. I think it's really great that we get to take sort of a lead role on campaigning for them. So I was going to tell you a little bit about the importance of chalk streams, but obviously you guys know that, and Alison has touched on a lot of the really important points. But I'll give you just a few statistics to start off, which I'm sure you may have heard before. So 85% of the world's chalk streams are located in England, and that's predominantly in the south and the east of England. So we're very lucky to have so many of these on our doorstep, as I'm sure you know and appreciate. And they're also so important, not just for people and wildlife, but for our water supply, which I think is a really great point to hit on with sort of MPs and decision makers, even if they feel like the issue isn't that relevant to them. When you sort of bring up water supply, they listen a little bit more, I find. So yeah, and then as Alison mentioned, only 11 are protected as triple SIs, and a couple are SACs, but that has some crossover as well. So not very many are protected, and that's where our campaign sort of comes in to ask for further protections for these chalk streams. So our campaign particularly focuses on asking for protections for chalk streams in planning. So the planning system is currently failing our chalk streams. This is for a couple of reasons, but some of these are the lack of a catchment scale approach. So it really doesn't address the pressures happening at different areas in the catchment. Things are often split across sort of council areas, or they're fragmented at the national level because there isn't a clear policy framework for chalk streams. So yeah, as Alison mentioned, the chalk stream recovery pack that we were expecting from government was shelved by the government earlier this year. So that could have provided sort of that national strategy to help support a catchment scale and a more national approach to chalk streams, but that is yet to be delivered. And chalk streams also aren't granted a protection under the National Planning Policy Framework. There has been some talk recently about chalk streams being included as irreplaceable habitats, and sort of added to that list, but the government is yet to do so. So yeah, this sort of covers some of the reasons why we're really focusing on planning. So these failures, as well as the government's focus on sort of growth and planning through the Planning and Infrastructure Bill and their targets for housing, which put particular focus on the rural areas. So our key ask on planning comes from the One Big Wish, which is where me and Alison link up. So our ask is for chalk streams to be granted a specific protection in planning, not just lumped in with sort of other rivers. And this has some key underlying asks. So this includes for chalk streams to be defined as irreplaceable habitats, for the introduction of 50 to 100 metre buffer zones in chalk catchments. So this is recommended by Natural England for vulnerable habitats. For local planning authorities to take account of water resources and sewerage systems in housing developments. So we try and influence this through responding to local plans and encouraging members to respond to local plans, and also for water efficiency standards to be raised to a minimum of 90 litres per person per day. So that is also more of a local focus one there. And on the right here are some photos of myself and our CEO Debbie, as well as some of the Watercress and Winterbourne's people and my lovely campaign leaders at the March for Water last year, speaking up for chalk streams. So this is an example of some of the campaigning activity we get involved with. So, as mentioned, the chalk stream recovery pack was shelved by the government, and in response to this, we sent a letter to the government, which was signed by 215 councillors. there were around 160 signatories from Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, and others were from Norfolk and Wiltshire. So that was really great that we could get sort of the support across different areas of England, but also across party. It was really important to us for the call to be cross-party. We don't want to sort of come out all guns blazing and immediately the government say, no, that's a Conservative issue, or no, that's a Liberal Democrat issue. So we've been very intentional at the beginning to make sure that these calls are cross-party, particularly when chalk streams run through the constituencies of MPs across so many parties, so many areas, and they really are so important. So we were really pleased to have that support from local councillors, and we did get a response to this letter from Matthew Pennycook, the Housing Minister. His response was a little bit disappointing to us. He sort of continued to lump chalk streams in with other rivers, which is an issue we have found with the government so far. But he did allude to chalk streams being included in that list of irreplaceable habitats and possibly in the National Planning Policy Framework. So hopefully in future we can get some updates there that will protect chalk streams. But we did campaign a couple of months before that for chalk streams to be included in the National Planning Policy Framework, which was not delivered. So I think it's really important that we continue to push as well currently. So one of the ways that we are pushing for chalk streams to be granted the specific protection in planning currently is through an amendment to the Planning and Infrastructure Bill. So you may have heard quite a lot about Planning and Infrastructure Bill. The Trust is working sort of across the bill on different aspects. So we are calling for the government to scrap Part 3 of the bill, which is sort of a really damaging part of the bill, which would set up a nature restoration fund for developers to pay into to sort of omit their environmental obligations. And Natural England would be responsible for delivering sort of plans for mitigation schemes, which would be signed off by the Secretary of State for Housing. So this really lacks a lot of safeguards and is why we're calling for this Part 3 to be scrapped. So we do currently have a live e-action. If you would like to fill that in, I will put the link in the chat after this, but I'm sure many of you may have already taken that e-action, which will email your MP and the Chancellor to call for a scrapping of Part 3 and protect sort of Hampshire's most precious places. But we're also trying to add positive things into the Planning and Infrastructure Bill. So in a different part of the bill, we're trying to campaign to add in an amendment which would protect chalk streams. So this would protect chalk streams in new spatial development strategies. So they will be required to identify measures taken to protect chalk streams, and it would impose responsibility on strategic planning authorities to deliver these protections and enhancements for chalk streams. So I think this is a really great opportunity, and this is something we've been working across different wildlife trusts and organisations, as Alison said earlier, to try and campaign for. And we have seen really great support from MPs. At the last stage, the amendment was signed by 14 MPs, and in the debates earlier last week, this week, I've been on leave, the chalk streams were spoken about by 9 MPs. So it's really great that we are seeing chalk streams on the agenda, and I think this campaign is a really key part of pushing that. Unfortunately, the amendment has not yet been accepted by government, but we have plans to further continue our advocacy at the stages in the House of Lords, and we are hoping to retable the amendment again at the Lords stage. So we are thinking we'll have more success there, with the sort of party makeup being slightly different in the Lords. So on to the early day motion, which is another part of our national campaign. So many of you may be aware that Alex Brewer is the MP for North East Hampshire, and she met with us earlier this year and agreed to table an early day motion for us on chalk streams. So for those of you that don't know, an early day motion is essentially an internal petition for MPs. So they don't usually have specific impacts, like they don't usually lead to a debate, but it can draw a lot of attention to an issue and is really good for campaigning and to show us what MPs are supportive of our cause for when we reach out to them in future. So last I checked, I think this had over 30 signatures, which is quite good for an early day motion. Some of them only get 1 or 2. So yeah, very pleased with how that's going. And that early day motion is still available for MPs to sign on to until the end of the Parliament in July. So if your MP hasn't already signed on to this, you could ask them to if you would like. And then onto our sort of local advocacy, we have been working with local councils to raise rights of the river motions in their councils. So the rights of the river framework is based on the Universal Declaration for River Rights, which asks for rivers to be granted a right to flow, a right to perform essential ecosystem functions, to be free from pollution, to be fed by sustainable aquifers, to have a right to native biodiversity, and a right to regeneration and restoration. So the rights of the river framework can sound like a very intimidating thing and maybe quite different to how we usually think about river protections, but I think that's almost what makes it so valuable, in that it does get people's attention. So the first rights of the river motion in the UK was passed by Lewes District Council on the Ouse, and this got quite a bit of press coverage. So we really wanted to build on this momentum of the river rights movement and bring that to Hampshire. So we have been working with Basingstoke and Deane Borough Council, where we've passed the second rights of the river motion in England, which is very exciting. And I know some of those councillors are on the call, so thank you very much for your help there. And we're continuing to work with the council to create a declaration to inform what that's actually going to look like to be implemented, and hopefully the motion will be able to shape planning policy as we go forward. As we were creating this motion with Basingstoke, we hosted a community engagement event, which was a really great way to get the community to feed into the motion, and for councillors and community groups and local people to all come together to make sure this motion was co-created and it really reflected people's concerns about the rivers. So we have another one of these events coming up for Winchester. So if you are based in and around Winchester and you'd like to feed into a rights of the river motion, that event will be on the 18th of June at the Winchester Quaker Meeting House, and it's a drop-in between 6 p.m. and 7:30 p.m. I can write the details in the chat. But yeah, it would be great to see some of you there and pick your brains for some of your river expertise, to make sure that the council in Winchester can have the best possible motion for us to hopefully pass at full council later this year. Yeah, and we've had a bit of interest from other councils as well, so it's looking like this could be a good way to sort of implement some protections for rivers locally. And so that is enough about my campaigns, but if you would like to get involved in our campaigns, or if you would like further support with a campaign that you'd like to run, we're able to help you with that, and we would love to help you build up campaigning experience and create a network of campaigners, where you can catch up with each other and catch up with the Trust quarterly, to campaign for nature. So we have the Wilder Campaign Leader programme, which I run, which is quite flexible to work around your schedule. So if you are interested in becoming a Wilder Campaign Leader, either to support our campaigns or to boost your own, please visit our website or scan the QR code and you can sign up there. I've got a little bit more information about what you can campaign on. So the answer is essentially anything. as long as it's nature and environment related. And chalk streams is a great focus, as it can build on our Save Our Chalk Streams campaign. And in terms of campaigning methods, you can sort of do whatever you feel most comfortable with, but this can include meeting with MPs and councillors, asking parliamentary questions, attending marches, letter writing, responding to consultations and planning applications. There's loads of different ways to get involved, and we can help support you in those. And just to finish off, to calm down from all of the policy talk that I've put you through for the last 15-20 minutes, here is a video. And that is all from me. So thank you very much. And yeah, if you would like to sign up to become a Wilder campaign leader, please do visit our website. Thank you.